I knew the exact moment it happened. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't some grand confrontation or betrayal that left me broken. No, it was something far more subtle, and that's what made it so dangerous. It was a single glance, a look so fleeting, but it changed everything. I had always prided myself on being the calm one. While the world around me spun in chaos, I remained centered, unbothered. At least, that's what I told myself. For years, I'd been living under the illusion that I had control over my life, my choices, and most importantly, over my marriage. It wasn't perfect, but I convinced myself it was good enough. At least, until that moment. It was an ordinary Friday. Rachel had just gotten home from work, her usual brisk pace marking the end of another long day. She came into the kitchen, dropped her bag on the counter, and walked straight to the fridge. There was nothing unusual about it. But as she reached for a bottle of water, I saw it, that glance. She didn't look at me with the same warmth I'd grown used to. It wasn't the soft, familiar gaze that said, "I'm happy you're here." It was something colder, more calculated, something empty. For a second, I thought I imagined it, but when I caught her eyes again, they flickered away quickly, like she was ashamed of being seen in that moment. I didn't know what to make of it. She didn't say anything. There was no argument, no sharp words, just that look. But it shook me. I had to pretend nothing was wrong. I continued with my evening routine, making dinner, playing some music to fill the awkward silence. But inside, my mind was spinning. Had I misread something? Was I just being paranoid? But then it happened again the next day. We were out for coffee, something we had done countless times, when the silence between us became suffocating. I tried to break it by asking her about her day, and she barely looked up from her phone, offering only half-hearted answers. I watched her, trying to figure out what was going on. There was a distance between us now, something that wasn't there before. It wasn't just the lack of conversation. It was the way she seemed to be actively avoiding me. The way she no longer seemed to care if I was around or not. At that moment, something clicked in my mind, the sudden realization that I had been blind for far too long. I wasn't noticing the things that had always been there. The growing coldness, the dismissive gestures, the disinterest in my company. It wasn't that Rachel had changed overnight. It was that I had finally woken up to the truth I had been avoiding for months, maybe even years. We went home after coffee, and I watched her retreat to the bedroom without a word. As I stood there, staring at the empty space she left behind, a dark thought crossed my mind. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt seen by her, and I couldn't remember the last time I had truly felt important to her. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment, every conversation, every glance she had given me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and I had been too naive to realize it. What had I missed? What was I not seeing? The next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let it slide anymore. I couldn't keep living this way, waiting for things to magically improve. I needed answers. But what I didn't know then was that my search for the truth would lead me down a path I could never have expected, one that would change everything. I decided to confront Rachel. It wasn't easy for me. I wasn't the type to dig into someone else's actions or pry into their thoughts. I hated conflict. I hated pushing. But something in me had shifted. I needed to understand. I needed to know what was happening to us, even if the truth was something I wasn't ready for. So, I waited for her to come home, sat in the same spot I had been sitting for hours, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of what I was about to ask. I was no longer the man who believed that everything was fine just because no one had said otherwise. I was now the man who saw the cracks in the facade. And I wasn't going to pretend they weren't there anymore. Rachel walked in, like every other day. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, Derek," she said, her voice robotic, distant. I stood up, my legs unsteady. "Rachel, we need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly, but she didn't ask why. She just nodded and sat down, folding her arms as if bracing herself for something. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone a bit colder than usual. I swallowed, gathering my thoughts. I've been noticing things, and I don't think I can ignore them anymore. Her eyes flashed briefly with a hint of annoyance, but she didn't speak. So I continued. It's like we're strangers, Rachel. Like you've been pulling away from me, and I can't figure out why." She didn't react at first. For a moment, it felt like we were in different worlds, separated by a barrier I couldn't cross. But then she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Derek, you're overthinking this." Everything's fine. But I could see it. Her defensive posture, the way her words didn't match the feeling in the room. It wasn't fine. It hadn't been for a long time. I pressed on. It's more than just this, Rachel. I can see it in the way you look at me, the way you avoid me, the way you don't care anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't speak for a long time, just staring at me, her face unreadable. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt before, the weight of a decision she had already made. Finally, she stood up, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen in them in years. Maybe it's because I've been thinking the same thing. Derek, she said softly, her voice shaking with a hint of frustration. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. And in that moment, she said something that shattered everything. Something I wasn't ready to hear. I've been thinking about leaving, she said, the words hanging heavy in the air. The floor beneath me seemed to drop. Her words hit me like a freight train. I've been thinking about leaving. At first, I didn't know how to respond. It felt like my breath had been knocked out of me, my world suddenly spinning out of control. I stood there, frozen, as the gravity of what she just said settled in. Was this a joke? Was she testing me, seeing how I would react? I couldn't tell. But the look in her eyes, it wasn't a playful one. It wasn't the expression of someone who was joking. No, this was real. I took a step back, trying to make sense of it all. What do you mean, thinking about leaving? My voice barely resembled my own, strained, full of disbelief. We've been together for years, Rachel. What could make you even think about something like that? She turned her back to me, walking to the window, staring out into the night, as if she were looking for some kind of answer in the dark. I've been unhappy for a while now, Derek. You've noticed, haven't you? I shook my head, my heart racing. No. I mean, I've noticed things have been off, but I thought it was just a phase. A rough patch. I didn't think it was something like this. Her words were colder now, as if she was removing herself from the conversation emotionally, as if she had already made up her mind. It's not just a rough patch, Derek. It's been a slow unraveling for months. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to make things work, but I don't think I can anymore. I've tried to tell you, in my own way. I've dropped hints, but you didn't pick up on them. I felt a pang of guilt. Had I really been that oblivious? Had I really missed the signs that things were falling apart? My mind scrambled, trying to piece together what she was saying, but I couldn't. This wasn't something I could just fix with a quick conversation or a promise to try harder. This was the end of something, and I didn't know if I could stop it from crumbling. Rachel, please, don't do this. I pleaded, my voice cracking. We can work through this. Whatever it is, we can fix it. You just have to tell me what's wrong. She shook her head, her back still to me, her silhouette bathed in the soft light from the street lamp outside. I've been trying to tell you, but you've never listened. You've been so wrapped up in your own world that I don't know if I can keep going like this. Her words hit me like daggers. Each one felt sharper than the last. I could feel myself slipping, like I was losing my grip on something that was once solid and real. I tried to reach for her, to make her understand how much I still cared, how much I still wanted to fight for us. But it felt like I was fighting against something invisible, something that was already too far gone. I love you, I said, my voice desperate. I've always loved you. Please, Rachel, let's fix this. We can go to counseling, we can talk more, we can do something. But she turned to face me then, her eyes colder than I'd ever seen them before. It's not about love anymore, Derek. It's about respect. It's about feeling valued. And for so long, I haven't felt either of those things. Not from you. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She looked at me with such finality, such coldness, that I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. For the first time, I wasn't sure who she was anymore. This wasn't the woman I married, the woman I had built my life around. This woman, standing in front of me, was a stranger. Respect? I whispered, barely able to find the words. Rachel, I've always respected you. I don't understand. What do you mean? She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the conversation was too much for her. You've never really seen me, Derek. You've never seen the little things, the ways I've tried to make you notice, to make you care. You've always been so focused on yourself, on your work, on what's easiest for you. You never put me first. And I've spent years waiting for you to change, waiting for things to get better. But they never did. I stood there in stunned silence, her words echoing in my mind. Was she right? Had I really been so wrapped up in my own life that I had neglected the woman I loved? I had always thought I was doing enough. I had always thought that by providing for us, by making sure everything was secure, I was showing her how much I cared. But Rachel didn't want security. She wanted connection. She wanted attention. She wanted me to see her. But I hadn't. Not like she needed me to. I didn't realize. I began, my voice barely audible. You never did. She interrupted, her tone sharp. And that's why I've been thinking about leaving. Because I deserve more than this. I deserve someone who can see me, who can appreciate me. Someone who doesn't make me feel invisible. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. I had been blind to her pain, and now, it felt like I was paying the price. The realization stung more than anything else. It wasn't about the fights we had, or the occasional arguments. It wasn't even about the things I could have done differently. It was about something deeper, something fundamental. And now, she was telling me that it was too late. I don't want to leave, she said, her voice softer now, almost resigned. But I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I've been unhappy for so long, Derek. And I can't keep living like this. The room felt colder now. The silence between us was deafening, and I could feel the distance between us growing by the second. It was like a wall had been built, brick by brick, over the years. A wall I didn't even know existed until it was too late to tear it down. I can change, I whispered, desperate. Just give me a chance, Rachel. Please. But Rachel just looked at me, her face unreadable. I don't think I can believe that anymore, Derek. And with that, my heart shattered. The silence that followed her words was deafening, like the kind of silence you get when you realize that something in your life has fundamentally changed, and no amount of pleading or negotiating will bring it back. I stood there, staring at Rachel, watching her face, trying to find something, anything, that would indicate that she hadn't already made up her mind. But there was nothing. There was no flicker of doubt in her eyes, no hesitation in her posture. She was resolute. I could feel the weight of my own breath as I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Rachel, don't just walk away from this. We've been through so much. This can't be the end. She didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I wondered if she was even listening. She was just standing there, her arms folded across her chest, her eyes fixed on the ground. I took a step toward her, but she held up her hand. It wasn't a defensive gesture, not at first. But the way she held her hand there, in between us, felt like a boundary she was unwilling to let me cross. It was as if the space between us had grown wider, immeasurably so, and no matter how close I got, it would always remain unreachable. I don't want to walk away from you, Derek, she finally said, her voice softer, but still heavy with emotion. But I can't keep pretending like everything is okay when it's not. I've tried to make this work, tried to make us work, but I can't change what I feel anymore. I just can't. I felt a sharp pang of regret, a deep, almost crushing sadness that came from realizing that there was nothing left I could do. She had already decided, and somehow, I hadn't seen it coming. All the signs were there, the late nights, the distant looks, the lack of connection. But I had missed them. I had kept thinking that if I worked harder, if I just paid more attention, if I just tried a little more, things would go back to the way they were. But they never would. Not now. Not after everything that had been said. Are you seeing someone else? The question slipped out before I could stop it, the desperation in my voice evident. I knew it was the wrong thing to ask, but the words had already left my lips. I couldn't take them back. Not now. She didn't flinch, didn't even look at me. Her gaze remained focused on some point in the distance, as if she couldn't bear to look me in the eye. No, Derek, she said, her tone flat. It's not about anyone else. It's about me. I need to find myself again. I need to be alone. I don't know who I am anymore, and I've been trying to ignore that for too long. I felt a coldness creep into my bones as I processed her words. I had always assumed that it was something outside of us, something external that had caused the distance between us. But it wasn't. It was her. She was lost in herself, disconnected from everything that had once brought her joy. From me. And no matter how much I tried to fix things, I realized that I couldn't fix her. The room seemed to get smaller, the walls closing in around me, as the full weight of our reality crashed down. I had spent so long trying to convince myself that I wasn't the problem, that I was doing everything I could. But I had ignored the most important thing, Rachel's feelings, her needs, her internal struggles that I had never fully understood. I was too caught up in my own self-pity, my own guilt, to see that she had been drowning for much longer than I'd realized. "I'm sorry," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I should have seen it. I should have been more present." She finally turned to face me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, but they weren't tears of anger. They were tears of sorrow, the kind that comes from exhaustion, from trying to carry something for so long that you just can't anymore. "It's not about being sorry, Derek. It's about understanding. And right now, I don't think you understand what I need." "What I need?" My heart clenched as I looked at her, desperate to make her understand that I wasn't trying to push her away. I wasn't trying to hold her back. But somehow, my words, my actions, had never been enough. I had been too blind to see the signs, too wrapped up in my own world to notice the cracks forming in the foundation of our marriage. "I love you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I love you so much, Rachel. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to do anything. Anything to make you see that we can still make it." She shook her head, taking a step back from me. "I don't know if I can believe that anymore," she said, her voice shaky now, as if she was on the verge of breaking. "I don't know if I can believe in us." The finality of her words hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just that she was ready to leave. It was that she had already given up. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just Rachel who had lost herself. I had too. I had lost myself in trying to fix something that was already broken, in trying to force something that was beyond saving. As she stood there, her back turned to me once again, I could feel the distance between us growing. The woman I had married, the woman I had once known so intimately, was slipping further and further away, and no matter how hard I tried to reach her, I knew it wouldn't matter. We were already beyond repair. "I can't make you stay," I said, my voice hollow. "But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I should have paid attention. I should have seen it. But I didn't. And now I don't know what's left for us." Rachel didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. And as I stood there, staring at the back of the woman I once loved, I knew that the chasm between us had grown too wide to bridge. She had already made her decision, and I was too late to stop it. The life we had built, the love we had shared, was now nothing more than a distant memory, slipping through my fingers like sand. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly alone. The air between us felt like a heavy fog, thick and suffocating. Rachel's decision was clear, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still holding on to something that no longer existed. As she stood there, not moving, not saying anything more, the reality of the situation began to sink in. There was no more hope of fixing this. Not with words, not with promises. It felt like a death, the death of a relationship that I had poured so much of myself into, and now, there was nothing left to salvage. I watched her as she turned away, her back still to me, and the silence grew louder with every passing second. The space between us felt vast, as though we were no longer even in the same room, despite standing just feet apart. I wanted to scream, to do something, anything to make her look at me again, to make her realize that I wasn't ready for this to end. But I didn't. I couldn't. She had already made up her mind, and no amount of pleading or anger would bring her back. I stood motionless, my hands shaking, my thoughts swirling like a tornado. For the first time in years, I felt utterly powerless. There were no more second chances. There were no more moments where I could try to fix things, no more time for me to prove that I could change, that I could be better. I had failed her. I had failed us. The weight of it all crushed me, and I felt like I was drowning. "I don't want to fight," I said, my voice breaking the silence, though it was barely a whisper. "I'm tired of fighting. I just want you to know that I still care, that I still love you." Rachel's head turned slightly, her face still shadowed, but I could see the faint outline of her expression. It wasn't a look of anger, not exactly. It was something worse. It was resignation. She was done. "I know you do," she replied softly, but there was no emotion behind it, nothing that sounded like the warmth I had once heard in her voice. "But love isn't enough, Derek. It never was. I'm not the same person I was when we first met. I've changed, and I think you have, too, in ways I can't ignore anymore." Her words stung deeper than anything I could have prepared for. She was right, though. I had changed. I wasn't the person I had been when we first started this relationship, but I hadn't changed in the ways she wanted me to. I hadn't grown in the ways that would make me the man she needed. And as much as I hated to admit it, I wasn't sure I could ever be that person. I didn't even know what that person looked like anymore. I never meant to hurt you, Rachel, I said, stepping forward, desperate for some sign of acknowledgement, some sign that she was still there, that she hadn't completely closed herself off from me. I never wanted to make you feel invisible. I see that now. She sighed, turning fully around to face me, but there was no warmth in her eyes, no compassion, just a quiet sadness. It's not about seeing me, Derek. It's about understanding me. I've tried to explain myself to you in every way I could, but you never heard me. And now, I'm tired of trying. I felt the ground beneath me shift. It was like I had been standing on solid earth, but now, it felt like I was losing my footing, like the foundation of everything we had built was crumbling beneath me. I didn't know, Rachel. I didn't know I was missing something that important. I thought I was enough for you. You were enough, but only for a while, she said, her voice steady but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe regret, maybe anger, maybe both. But not anymore. And I think, deep down, you knew that. You just didn't want to admit it. Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and for the first time, I couldn't argue with her. I had known. I had felt the distance between us for a long time, but I had buried it. I had buried it under work, under distractions, under the false belief that everything was okay because we hadn't fought in a while. But now, in the face of Rachel's quiet resignation, I couldn't deny it any longer. She was right. I had been lying to myself, telling myself that if I just worked harder, if I just tried harder, things would get better. But they didn't. They couldn't. Rachel moved toward the door, and my heart sank. I could feel the finality of her steps echo in my chest. Rachel, please, I whispered, my voice trembling with desperation. Don't leave. Don't walk away. She paused, her hand resting on the doorknob, and for a moment, I thought she might turn back. But when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it held a weight I couldn't ignore. I've already walked away, Derek. You just didn't notice until now. And with that, she opened the door, stepping out into the night without a second glance. I stood there, frozen in place, the weight of her departure settling around me like a thick fog. I wanted to chase after her, to beg her to stay, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had made up her mind. And so had I, in a way. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was left standing in the empty space between the life I thought I had and the life that was waiting for me. A life I didn't recognize, a life I hadn't planned for. For a long time, I just stood there. Time seemed to stretch, the silence louder than ever. I had lost her, and now, I had to find a way to live with that. But what I didn't know then was that this moment, this painful, hollow moment, would be the turning point. The point where I could either remain in this abyss or finally start the painful, messy process of rebuilding. What I didn't know was that the hardest part wasn't losing Rachel. The hardest part was going to be finding myself again. And that, I realized, was something I had completely forgotten how to do. In that quiet, empty house, I began the first step of that journey. The journey of facing the truth, no matter how painful it was, and learning to live with the pieces of myself that had been left behind. The days after Rachel left felt like a slow-motion disaster. Time didn't work the same way it had before. It felt distorted, stretching out infinitely, every second pulling me deeper into a pit of confusion and regret. I tried to keep myself busy, distracting myself with work, picking up extra shifts, trying to make myself forget the empty space where she used to be. But every corner of the house, every silence, screamed of her absence. At night, I would lie awake in the bed we once shared, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her words echoing in my head. I've already walked away, Derek. It wasn't just the end of our relationship. It felt like the end of everything I thought I knew about myself. Rachel had been my world, and now she was gone. And I wasn't sure how to navigate the world without her. I tried to reach out to her. I texted, I called, I left messages, hoping that somehow she'd realize the gravity of the situation, that she'd come back. Each message felt like a desperate plea, each one worse than the last. I was spiraling, losing the little grip I had on reality. But no matter what I said, there was no response. The silence between us grew even more suffocating. It was as if she had erased me from her life completely, and I couldn't even get the satisfaction of knowing why. She had just gone, and that was it. At work, I was a shell of the person I used to be. I couldn't focus. My mind kept wandering to her, to what went wrong, to how I missed the signs. I couldn't stop replaying every moment, every conversation, every moment of affection we had shared. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was suffocating. How had it come to this? How had I not seen it coming? I kept searching for something, some clue, some moment when it all changed, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The truth was, I had ignored the little things, the subtle cracks that had been forming beneath the surface for so long. Now, I was paying the price for it. The loneliness was the hardest part. When you've been part of something for so long, it's hard to know who you are without it. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I would sit in the living room, the same place we used to laugh, talk, and make plans, and I couldn't recognize the space anymore. It had been marked by her presence, and now it felt hollow, as though it had no meaning without her in it. I couldn't even find comfort in the things I used to enjoy. Movies felt like noise, food had no taste, and even the familiar streets of our neighborhood felt foreign. It was like I had been walking through the motions of life, trying to pretend everything was fine, but the truth kept hitting me harder and harder. Rachel was gone, and I had lost everything. I tried to keep myself busy, to force myself into some kind of routine, but it never worked. The loneliness wouldn't let me escape it. Every morning, I would wake up, already dreading the day ahead. I'd stumble out of bed, make myself coffee, and sit in the silence. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of her. I couldn't stop imagining her in my place, going through her own motions, living her life without me. Had she already moved on? Had she found someone else? The thought tortured me. I hated that she could leave so easily, like I meant nothing to her. And yet, here I was, unable to even get out of bed some mornings. One evening, I decided to take a walk. The air was cool, and the streets were quiet, almost too quiet. I walked for hours, not really knowing where I was going, just trying to move through the world and shake the feeling of being trapped in my own head. I passed familiar faces, people I'd seen countless times before, but none of them saw me. None of them knew what was going on inside. I was invisible. I had always been the quiet guy, the one who blended into the background, but now it felt like I had disappeared entirely. I couldn't help but wonder if Rachel felt the same way. If she felt invisible in our relationship, just like I had begun to feel toward the end. Had she always felt this way, and I had been too blind to notice? By the time I got home, it was late. I was exhausted, mentally and physically. I walked through the front door, expecting to be met by the same emptiness that had followed me around all day. But when I stepped inside, something was different. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of urgency. I couldn't explain it, but I had a feeling that this was the turning point. I went to the living room, my eyes immediately falling on the spot where Rachel and I used to sit together. I hadn't sat there since she left. I couldn't. But now, it felt like something was pulling me to that place, like I had to face the memories head on. I sat down, my body sinking into the couch. It felt like 1,000 memories rushed over me all at once. The laughter, the late-night talks, the plans for the future. I could still hear her voice in my mind, her laughter filling the room, and it almost broke me all over again. The memories were sharp, like shards of glass piercing through me. But as the rush of memories faded, something else started to take shape, something new. It wasn't just the emptiness or the loss anymore. There was a realization starting to form at the back of my mind, one I had been avoiding. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe I had been ignoring everything that really mattered. Maybe this wasn't just about her leaving. Maybe it was about me, about the person I had become, about how I had neglected my own happiness for the sake of convenience, about how I had stopped growing. For the first time since she left, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I thought. Maybe this pain, this loss, was the wake-up call I needed to change. But I also knew one thing for sure. I couldn't do this alone. I couldn't just keep hiding in the silence. I had to confront everything I had ignored, everything I had buried inside me for so long. Rachel had made her decision, but I wasn't done with mine. And even though it felt impossible, even though it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, I knew that I had to take the next step. I had to find my way out of this darkness, even if it meant walking through the fire to get there. The morning after I sat in the empty living room, surrounded by the remnants of what was once a life I thought was unbreakable, I woke up with a new sense of clarity, Or maybe it was just the residue of exhaustion that made everything feel a little sharper. Either way, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was at a crossroads. I had two choices ahead of me, and they both terrified me. I could continue spiraling into this hollow version of myself, clinging to the past, or I could choose to change. But the question that lingered in my mind, the question that I couldn't stop asking myself, was whether I had the strength to make the choice to move forward. As I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, I noticed something different. It wasn't a huge change, not something visible to anyone else, but it was there, a small shift in the way I looked at myself. I didn't see the defeated man I had been last week. I saw someone who was broken, yes, but someone who was beginning to understand that the real fight wasn't about Rachel anymore. The real fight was with myself. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo the things I had neglected, the mistakes I had made, the way I had let things fester between us without truly listening. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away that I forgot to take a step back and ask myself, what about me? I had lost myself in our relationship, in the need to be the perfect partner, the perfect provider. But in doing so, I had forgotten who I was outside of her, outside of us. I spent the day taking small, deliberate actions to prove to myself that I wasn't a complete lost cause. I called a therapist. It wasn't something I had ever considered before. I'd always thought that kind of thing was for people who were really struggling, who had severe problems. But I had to admit that I was struggling. I was falling apart, piece by piece, and I couldn't do it alone anymore. I also signed up for a gym membership, something I hadn't done in years. I wasn't looking to get shredded or anything. I didn't have that kind of time or energy. But I needed something to channel my energy into, something that would force me to focus on myself instead of constantly looking backwards. I didn't even have a specific workout plan in mind. I just needed to move, to push myself physically, to feel something other than the heaviness of my own thoughts. But as I began to work on myself, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. Even after all this time, even with everything that had happened, I still felt the pull toward her. I knew that I shouldn't. I knew that I needed to move on, to let go. But it was hard. It was hard to reconcile the love I still had for her with the person she had become in my mind. The person who had already walked away, who had already let go of us. It felt like a betrayal of myself, of everything I was working toward, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I wondered if she was thinking about me too. And then, a week later, something unexpected happened. I was sitting at a coffee shop, the kind we used to go to when we were first dating. It had been a hard day, one of those days where the weight of everything hit me all at once. I was drinking my coffee, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, when I heard a voice that stopped me cold. Derek. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat. There she was, Rachel. It had been weeks since I last saw her, and here she was, standing in front of me, looking as composed as ever, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before. Something different. I didn't expect to see you here, she said, her voice tentative, like she wasn't sure whether she should sit down or walk away. She looked nervous, which was strange. I had always been the nervous one in our relationship, never quite sure of myself, but now it was her. She seemed unsure. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Yeah, I didn't expect to see you either. How are you? She paused, biting her lip, her gaze shifting to the side, as if she were searching for the right words. I'm okay. I've been figuring things out. You know, the whole thing. Everything that happened. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know if she wanted to talk, if she was just making small talk, or if she was genuinely trying to reconnect. I wasn't sure what I wanted, either. I had spent so much time focusing on my own healing, my own path forward, that I hadn't even considered what I would do if I saw her again. I had made progress, I told myself. I had started to put myself back together. But the sight of her, standing there in front of me, brought up so many emotions I hadn't been ready to confront. I've been thinking about you, she continued, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. About us. About everything. My chest tightened at her words. I hadn't expected her to say that. I had assumed, after everything, that she would have completely moved on. I had imagined her building a life without me, without even looking back. But here she was, talking like she hadn't completely closed the door on us. Rachel, I started, but she held up her hand, silencing me. No, Derek. I know. I don't expect us to just pick up where we left off. But I wanted to apologize. For everything. For not communicating better. For not being honest with myself or with you. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to pull her into my arms and tell her that we could still make it work, that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But I knew that wasn't the answer. Not anymore. Not after everything that had happened. I've been working on myself, I said, the words coming out more easily than I thought they would. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I have to focus on myself right now. And I think you do too. Her face softened, a small, sad smile crossing her lips. I know. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I never did. We sat there for a long time, just talking, but not about us. Not about our past. Instead, we talked about the things we had done to move forward. The changes we were both making, the steps we were taking in our lives. It wasn't a closure, not the kind I had expected, but it was something. Something real. When we finally parted ways, neither of us made any promises. We didn't know what the future would bring, but it felt like a step in the right direction. I walked away from that meeting with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't the end of everything, but it was a beginning of something different. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, the hardest part of all of this wasn't about moving on from Rachel. It was about learning to move on from the version of myself I had lost along the way. I didn't expect the phone call. In fact, I had almost completely convinced myself that it wouldn't come. After Rachel and I met at the coffee shop, I thought that was the final chapter, a quiet end to a tumultuous part of our lives. I had felt a sense of closure, a strange kind of peace settling over me, as if we had both acknowledged that the past was the past, and now we had to learn to live separately. The words had been exchanged, the apology made, and there was nothing left to say. But then, a week later, it came. The phone rang late one night, and for a moment, I almost didn't answer. I had gotten so used to the silence, to the feeling of being alone, that the idea of hearing from anyone, let alone Rachel, felt unsettling. But I couldn't let it go. I picked up the phone, and the moment I saw her name on the screen, a wave of mixed emotions surged through me. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I could feel my heart rate pick up. "Derek." Her voice was soft, hesitant, almost like she was testing the waters. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. Part of me was afraid that this was some kind of false hope, that talking to her again would only bring back the pain we had just started to bury. But there was something in her voice, something fragile, that made me hesitate. I could feel the tension in my chest, the pressure building as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "I'm listening," I said finally, my voice tight with the weight of uncertainty. "I don't know where to start," she admitted. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background, and I imagined her standing somewhere unfamiliar, just like I had been so many times over the past few weeks. I can't stop thinking about how we left things. About how I left things. It feels like I'm running away from everything, and I don't know if that's the right choice." I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to ask why she was coming back now, why she couldn't have made these realizations earlier, when things were still salvageable. But another part of me understood what she was saying, the same way I had understood when I was going through the depths of my own pain. We were both trying to figure out who we were outside of the relationship we had built. "I don't know what you want me to say, Rachel," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. "I've been trying to move forward. I've been trying to rebuild myself, and I can't just go back to what we were." "I know," she said quickly. "I'm not asking for that. I'm not asking to pick up where we left off. I don't want to leave things like this. I don't want the last thing we said to each other to be the end. I don't want you to think that I didn't care. Because I did, Derek. I still do." Her words hit me harder than I was prepared for. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I was better off without her, that our relationship had ended for a reason, that I should be focused on my own healing. But hearing her say that she still cared made everything feel so much more complicated. It was like reopening a wound I had just started to heal, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to go through that again. "I don't want you to hurt, Rachel," I said quietly. "But I don't know how we can fix what's broken. We've both changed so much, and I don't know if there's anything left for us." "I know," she whispered back, and there was a long pause, a silence that hung between us like a cloud. "But I'm asking for a chance to try, just a chance to see if we can be different, if we can be more than we were." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. And I realized, in that moment, that I couldn't just walk away from her again. Not after everything we had shared. Not after everything I still felt for her. But at the same time, I couldn't pretend that everything was fine, that it could all be fixed with a few kind words. The truth was, I wasn't sure who we were anymore. I wasn't sure if we were capable of finding our way back to each other, not after all that had happened. I don't know if I can, Rachel, I admitted, my voice shaky now. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, but I'm willing to see if we can start something new, something different. I could hear her exhale on the other end of the line, like she had been holding her breath for a long time. I don't expect everything to be fixed overnight, she said softly. But maybe we can take it slow. Maybe we can figure out who we are, together, without the weight of the past dragging us down. I didn't respond right away. The idea of starting over, of reopening the door to something that had already hurt so much, terrified me. But part of me also realized that I wasn't ready to give up on her, on us. Not completely. I don't know what this is going to look like, Rachel, I said finally, my heart heavy with the uncertainty of it all. But I'm willing to try. I can't promise anything, but I'm willing to see where it goes. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but there was a sense of relief in it. That's all I can ask for, Derek. That's all I need. Just a chance. And with those words, I realized something important. It wasn't about going back to the way things were, because that version of us was gone. It wasn't about pretending that everything would just magically fall into place. But maybe, just maybe, it was about trying again. It was about giving ourselves permission to rebuild, piece by piece, without the pressure of trying to recreate the past. As the conversation ended, I felt a strange mixture of hope and fear wash over me. The future was uncertain. We were both scarred, broken in our own ways, and we had no idea where this path would lead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to take a step forward, to take that chance. Because sometimes, the hardest part isn't letting go. It's learning to rebuild from the pieces you thought were lost forever. In the days that followed that phone call, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, nor was it an overnight fix. But I could feel it, the slow but steady rebuilding of something we thought was long gone. Rachel and I didn't rush back into anything. We didn't try to erase the past or ignore the hurt that had been caused. Instead, we took small, careful steps. We spent more time talking, really talking. Not about the pain or the mistakes, but about the future, about the lives we had been living separately, about what we wanted now. We started to find comfort in each other's company again, but it was different this time. There was no pressure, no expectation to make everything perfect right away. We were learning to be vulnerable with each other, to ask for what we needed without fear of rejection. It was as if we were meeting again for the first time, but with the wisdom of everything we had experienced together and apart. I had never been the kind of person to believe in second chances, not fully. But now, looking back, I realized that sometimes a second chance isn't about undoing the past. It's about understanding it, learning from it, and finding a new path forward, together. And that's what we were doing. It wasn't perfect. We still had moments of doubt, moments where we stumbled and questioned if we were doing the right thing. But with each day, we grew stronger. I started to see the man I wanted to be, not the one I had been for Rachel, but the one I had neglected during those years. I began investing in myself in ways I hadn't before. I joined a class, worked on my personal growth, and made time for the things I loved. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building a life that didn't revolve around someone else. And that, I realized, was something Rachel and I both needed, not just as a couple, but as individuals. And then, one evening, after a quiet dinner at home, Rachel turned to me, a softness in her eyes. "I'm proud of us," she said quietly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We've come a long way." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, we have. But we're not done yet. We're just getting started." For the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. We were starting something new, something built on understanding, trust, and the willingness to grow. We didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to keep trying, to keep showing up for each other every day. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected to feel: peace. We weren't the same people we had been when we first met, and that was okay. We were different, but that didn't mean we couldn't find our way back to each other. We had learned the hard way that love wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience. It was about choosing to keep fighting, even when it felt easier to give up. I looked at Rachel, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see the pain or the mistakes that had been part of our past. I saw the woman I had always loved, the one who had fought for us, even when I hadn't known how to fight for myself. I reached for her hand, and as she squeezed it, I knew that we were ready for whatever came next. We weren't going to fix everything overnight, but together, we could build something new, something real. And that was enough. Because sometimes, love isn't about getting everything right the first time. It's about learning, growing, and having the courage to try again, together.